Night in Jakarta is never truly quiet, but sometimes it feels like the city chooses silence. A silence so thick it presses against your ears, as if the streets, the buildings, even the air itself are holding their breath. On this night, the sky is a solid blanket of gray. No stars, no moon, just a low, heavy ceiling that traps the warmth of the day and the tension of the night. Far away, you can hear the faint hum of traffic along the main roads, the occasional bark of a stray dog. But here, in Bintaro, standing along this stretch of old railway, there is nothing. Only stillness and the quiet, steady weight of the rails beneath your feet. Michael Turner stands alone, hands deep in his jacket pockets, eyes fixed on the twin lines of steel disappearing into the darkness. He's a freelance journalist from the United States, and he did not come here for leisure. 2 weeks ago, he received an email. No subject line, no sender name, just one sentence. Come to Bintaro. Listen for the train that never stops. He ignored it at first, until another arrived. Same text, same chilling simplicity, and this time, an attached image. It was an old photograph, 2 commuter trains mangled together, rescue workers in 1980s uniforms, and something in the background. Behind the wreckage, a shadow, shaped like a person, but not quite. Michael doesn't believe in ghosts, but he does believe in stories, and a story like this could bring his fading career back to life. So here he is, standing in the same place where 36 years ago, Indonesia's worst rail disaster unfolded. October 19th, 1987, the Bintaro collision. It was a Monday morning, humid, unremarkable, at least at first. Train 225 left Tanah Abang station, heading south toward Serpong. It was a local commuter service, packed with office workers, students, and vendors. At the same time, Train 220 departed from Serpong toward Jakarta Kota. Its cars were just as crowded. The timetable was clear. One of them should have been held at a siding to let the other pass. But something went wrong, a miscommunication or a signal that wasn't received. And now, 2 heavy commuter trains were racing toward each other on the same track. Passengers remember the moment before the impact, a strange stillness, a change in the sound of the wheels, as if the rails themselves knew what was coming. And then, the collision. Metal folding in on itself, steel shrieking, wood splintering, the air filled with shouts, cries, the breaking of glass. The lead carriages crumpled like paper, bodies pinned between twisted frames, blood mixing with engine oil, running down the ballast stones. Rescue teams rushed in. They worked through the night under the glow of Petromax lanterns, lifting debris, pulling survivors free. Some victims screamed for family members who would never answer. Others were already silent. And then there were the whispers. Volunteers swore they heard voices calling their names from deep within the wreckage. When they followed the sound, they found no one, only the lifeless remains of passengers, faces frozen in terror. By the end, more than 150 lives were lost, hundreds injured, and Bintaro would never be the same. In the weeks that followed the collision, grief was not the only thing that lingered. The wreckage was cleared, the rails repaired, but the atmosphere around the crash site remained heavy. People walking near the tracks late at night spoke of a strange sensation. The air would grow colder. Sometimes, a faint smell of burning oil would drift through the wind. Other times, it was the sharp tang of rust and blood. The woman on the tracks. It started with the night watchman. A few weeks after the crash, One guard at the nearby station radioed in a report. He'd seen a woman standing in the middle of the tracks. She wore a torn office uniform, the same kind worn by many of the victims. Her head hung low, hair covering her face. The guard shouted for her to move. There was a train due in minutes. She didn't react. He ran closer, waving his arms, and when she finally lifted her head, half her face was gone. Not scarred, not burned, gone, as if something had torn it away in a single violent motion. The guard stumbled back. By the time he regained his footing, she had vanished. The crying child. Then there were the children. More than one resident claimed to have seen a small boy sitting on the wooden sleepers by the rails, always alone, always crying, but no sound came from his mouth. One witness, a shopkeeper named Yudi, swore he approached the boy one evening. He placed a hand on the child's shoulder and felt nothing. His hand went straight through. The boy looked up at him, eyes pale as milk, before fading into thin air. The ghost train. And then, the most feared story of all, the ghost train. It didn't always appear in the same place. Sometimes, it was seen gliding past the old station at 2 a.m. Other times, it would emerge from the curve where the collision occurred. Its lights were dim, flickering yellow. Its paint was faded, chipped, the metal scarred. Inside, the passengers sat in eerie stillness. Some had faces ruined by injury, others no faces at all. And in the very last carriage stood the woman in the torn uniform, always staring out the window, always watching. Michael's first encounters. Michael spent his first days in Bintaro interviewing locals. At a warung near the tracks, an elderly man told him, "You can fix the rails, you can clean the blood, but the spirits stay. They don't know they're dead. Or maybe they do, and they're angry." A younger man, a mechanic, claimed he'd seen the ghost train himself. "It doesn't make the sound of a normal train," he said. "It's quieter, but the wheels, they scream." Michael took notes. Every account seemed to circle the same few images: the woman in the uniform, the crying child, and the train that never stops. The first stakeout. That night, Michael set up his cameras, one near the old station, one at the curve, and one on the iron bridge. The hours passed slowly. The only sounds were crickets, the occasional rustle of leaves. Then, at exactly 12:47 a.m., a vibration in the rails. Faint at first, then stronger. The sound came next. Metal wheels grinding against steel. Too slow for a scheduled train, but too heavy to be anything else. The fog rolled in, thick and low. From within it, a yellow headlight appeared. Michael raised his camera. The train emerged, an older model, long retired. Its windows were dirty, but through them, Michael could see shapes. Faces, broken faces, hollow eyes, hands tapping slowly against the glass. In the last carriage, the woman stood. Her lips moved, but the sound was lost in the fog. The train slowed, stopped. The door in front of him creaked open. Michael didn't step inside that night. Something, instinct maybe, kept his feet rooted to the gravel. The fog thickened around the train, swallowing its edges. And then, without a sound, it began to move again. The wheels turned slowly at first, then faster, until the yellow light faded into the darkness, and the fog rolled back to reveal nothing. The rails were empty and cold. The days between. Michael spent the next 2 days combing through archives, old newspaper clippings from 1987, black and white photographs of the wreck, lists of the dead, lists of the missing. One detail kept surfacing in survivor interviews. Multiple passengers claimed to have seen a woman in the moments before the crash. She was walking through the train, moving from car to car, but no one remembered her boarding. No one knew her name. Some swore she was in the other train, just before impact, as if she'd been in both, at once. A visit to the yard. On the third day, Michael visited a railway storage yard. This was where damaged carriages were brought, stripped for parts, or left to rust. A worker named Raka led him through rows of metal shells. Some were from minor accidents. Others bore scars from Bintaro. One carriage still had shattered windows and deep, jagged tears along its side, where steel had been peeled back like paper. The air inside was stale, but Michael swore he could smell burnt oil, and faintly, iron. As he stepped inside, his recorder crackled, static at first, then a whisper, faint, almost human. "Leave." Raka turned sharply. "Did you hear that?" Michael asked. But Raka's face had gone pale. He muttered something about not staying after dark and walked quickly back toward the gate. The second stakeout. That night, Michael returned to the bridge, but this time, he wasn't alone. A young security guard named Anwar had agreed to join him. They set up a single camera facing the curve and waited. At 1:03 a.m., the rails began to vibrate. Anwar's flashlight beam cut through the fog, catching the faint outline of a train. This time, Michael stepped closer. The headlights' glow washed over him, pale and sickly. The first carriage passed slowly. Every window filled with faces, mouths moving in silence. And then, the last carriage stopped right in front of them. The woman was there, head tilted slightly, eyes locked on Michael. She lifted a hand and pointed to the open door. Anwar whispered, "Don't." Michael took one step forward. The air around him dropped, sharp, biting cold. His breath plumed in the beam of Anwar's flashlight. The woman spoke. Her voice was low, but clear. "You've seen us twice. You'll see what they didn't." The next thing Michael remembered was standing inside the carriage, the door closing behind him. The floor was slick under his shoes. The smell, thick with smoke, rust, and something sweet, like rotting fruit. Passengers lined both sides. Some watched him. Some stared at the floor. At the far end, the woman turned, and the train began to move. The train rolled forward, but the world outside didn't move like it should. Through the windows, the fog swirled, thick, restless, almost alive. Shapes drifted within it, outlines of buildings, trees, faces. Every few seconds, Michael swore he saw a flash of something real, a streetlight, a house, a stretch of track, before it dissolved back into the shifting white. The hum of the engine was low and steady. The sound of the wheels on the rails had changed, slower, heavier, as if each rotation was pulling the train deeper into some place it didn't belong. The passengers didn't speak, but their heads, slowly, began to turn toward him, one by one. Some had eyes clouded white. Some had no eyes at all, just dark, empty sockets. Others stared with expressions that were not anger, but something worse, expectation. The transformation outside. Gradually, the fog began to thin, and Michael realized he was no longer seeing the present. It was daylight outside, bright, harsh, the air shimmered with heat. The year felt wrong. Then he saw them, two trains, moving toward each other on the same track. The colors of their paint were brighter, their windows clean, and through them, passengers sat unaware, reading newspapers, talking, eating from paper-wrapped parcels. The collision hadn't happened yet. Michael pressed his hand to the glass. "This isn't real," he whispered to himself. But the woman in the torn uniform was watching him from the end of the carriage. She began to walk toward him, each step slow, measured. Her shoes made no sound on the slick floor. When she stopped just a few feet away, she spoke. They didn't listen. No one did. Now, you will. Before he could respond, the air outside seemed to ripple. The distant sound of steel on steel grew sharper, faster, and then impact. Reliving the collision. It wasn't like watching a recording. It was happening around him. The sound was deafening. Steel screamed as it folded in on itself. The jolt threw him sideways into a seat. Passengers were hurled from their places, some smashing into walls, others into each other. The lights flickered violently, then went out. A hot wind tore through the carriage, carrying with it the smell of smoke, scorched metal, and blood. Michael heard crying, shouting, then silence, broken only by the hiss of ruptured pipes. He stood, disoriented. The carriage was tilted at an angle. The floor was littered with shattered glass. Through a twisted gap in the wall, daylight poured in. And beyond it, he saw the wreckage of the other train. Bodies lay scattered across the ballast stones. Some moved feebly. Others didn't move at all. The whispering dead. A sound rose behind him. At first he thought it was the groan of damaged steel, but it grew clearer, and he realized it was voices. Dozens of them, whispering his name. Michael, Michael. He turned. Every passenger was now standing. They crowded the narrow aisle, their faces pale, their eyes fixed on him. The woman stepped forward. You are here because you can see us, because you will remember. Michael shook his head. I don't understand. They will not let us leave, she said. The train never stops. It only carries more. The air grew colder. Frost began to form on the windows. And then, in the reflection, Michael saw something that froze his breath. He was no longer standing in the aisle. He was seated in the very last row. The woman's hand rested on his shoulder, and in the reflection, his face looked different, paler, hollow. The train was moving again, but the world outside was not the one Michael knew. There was no daylight now, no fog, just darkness. And within that darkness, faint shapes moved alongside the train, shadowy figures keeping pace, their heads turning toward the windows as they passed. Some pressed their faces to the glass, skin stretched, eyes sunken deep into shadow. Others drifted backward into the black, swallowed without a trace. Inside, the passengers did not sit. They stood in the aisles, unmoving, their attention locked on Michael. The woman in the torn uniform leaned closer. Her voice was almost gentle now. They took our names from the newspapers. They buried our bodies, but they never hurt us. Michael's breathing quickened. What do you want from me? Her gaze deepened, holding him still. To tell the truth, to remember us, and to take our place when it's time. The transfer. The lights flickered overhead. With each strobe, Michael felt weaker, colder. He looked down and saw frost crawling up his hands. His skin had lost its color. The passengers around him began to smile, but the smiles were wrong, too wide, too strained, as if their faces had forgotten how. One by one, they began to fade. Not vanish, but dissolve, like ash drifting into the air. Only the woman remained. She placed something in Michael's hand. When he looked down, it was a folded scrap of newspaper, a clipping from 1987. The headline read, Passenger List, Train 225. Beneath it, his name. The final stop. The train slowed. Michael felt a pull, not physical but deep in his chest, as if something was trying to decide whether to let him go. The doors opened. Cold night air rushed in. He stumbled out onto gravel, turned, and saw the train roll backward into the darkness, its yellow light shrinking until it was gone. The rails were empty. The world was quiet again. In his hand, the newspaper clipping crumbled to dust. Morning discovery. At sunrise, a railway worker found Michael's camera lying beside the tracks. The footage was mostly static, but the last minute showed a moving train. In the first carriages, empty seats. In the last carriage, Michael Turner, sitting at the window, pale still. Behind him, the woman in the torn uniform, her hand on his shoulder. The camera shook, as if the person holding it had stepped back in fear, and then the train simply faded. Even now, locals say that on certain nights, you can hear the wheels on the rails when no train is scheduled. If you stand too close, you might see its yellow light in the fog. And if you look inside, you might spot a foreign man in the last row, staring right at you. And if you do, the woman will find you next.